We want to be treated as though we are babies, unable to take the challenges that life throws our way or the obstacles that are placed by commission or by omission. And for that reason, we will never be considered to be the same. And here are some things to consider. Firstly, let me start with definitions, because I think definitions are important. Your ancestry is simply your lineage. It deals with where you're from. In other words, your people, the people from whence you came, the people who, and the generations that began what we call the family tree of creating a pathway for you and I. Your ancestry goes back way before you were born and way before your parents were born. Your heritage, in other words, heritage comes from the word inheritance. It deals with the things that we inherit or where we were lucky to have inherited from our ancestors. Traditions, our cultures, language, behaviors, attitudes. Sometimes it goes as far as even how we dress. Sometimes you see a lovely African woman dressed in local attire and it looks beautiful. That is the heritage, something inherited from the people before. And we express that in how we speak, how we dance, what we say, special occasions. We express that by saying the traditions that we were given as inheritance are sacred to us. We want to share with other people, but these are connected to our people and our ancestry. Your ethnicity is different. Your ethnicity refers to, generally speaking, attributes that you and I have. Those attributes vary across geography. So some places it could be the culture or the habits that you have as people. For some other people, it could also be the location of the region from whence your people come from. For some other people, your ethnicity could go as far as traditions, precepts, behaviors, language, religion, and, although we shouldn't, sometimes includes race. Your ethnicity in the West has been completely construed as being similar to race. It's not. For example, if I were to bring 20 people, 2 from West Africa, 5 from, say, Northern Africa, let me start again. 20 people, 4 from West Africa, 4 from Northern Africa, 4 from Southern or the southern part of Africa, 4 from the eastern part of Africa, and then 4 from the central part of Africa, effectively representing most of the African people. From a race perspective, we will share similar ethnic images. We will be called as having one race. But from an ethnicity perspective, we will be very, very different. In Europe, there is more similarities amongst the European people across countries than you have in Africa. Part of the reason has to do with colonization, religion, the fact that there are parts of Africa that were colonized by the Italians, the Brits, the Portuguese, the Spanish. There were parts that were colonized by the French, the Germans, and even the Belgians. So over years, what you find is that the several parts of Africa are very, very, though similar racially and from an ethnic image, were very dissimilar from an ethnicity and an ancestry and therefore a heritage perspective. In the UK, those who share my ethnic image get very offended and conflate nationality, ethnicity, and citizenship. I hope today's session will help in understanding, perhaps, a different lens through which you can, go about your interactions with people who are, let's say in this particular example, people who are of the Anglo-Saxon ancestry or Anglo-Saxon heritage. I have found, and I don't know why this is, that in interactions between those who are by heritage and by ancestry English, or in other words, Anglo-Saxon, I'm talking about heritage, ancestry, and now I'm going into ethnicity. You can be ethnically English or British, but that ethnicity is based on your heritage, which you inherited, or your ancestry, which again you inherited, and effectively this incidental attributes. And you can have another person who is also British by birth. When interactions take place between those people, we get to see something that is profound, which is whenever nationalism and liberalism are at odds, nationalism will always triumph. To put it in a more easy way to understand, liberalism is the idea that every person has equal value and that the individual is a sovereign person, and irrespective of where you're from, you have equal value and equal rights as other people. Now, this becomes a challenging position because we've heard and we know about the reference to blood and soil. If the people of the land who are Anglo-Saxons say, well, my forefathers and my parents and my grandparents died in Normandy to protect this land for me and my people. I have a stake because I only have one homeland. There is no way and no place for me to go. So it's important for me to recognize that this is blood and soil for me. This is the only place I can go. Therefore, I perceive my inheritance, my heritage, to have been given to me by my ancestors. Thus, my ethnicity is rooted in the soil and in my ancestry. You and I may have equal rights as nationals of the country. We might have a political document that says we are both citizens of the country. But in our interaction, if I were to ask you, in good faith, peaceably, without any offense being given, and as part of a first interaction, and if my conversation with you is based on attributes that I see that say to me that you are different or you're projecting your uniqueness to me, such as we had it between the royal aide and Ngozi Fulani, she was dressed in a very African attire. These are things that people would wear in special occasions or on special occasions in parts of Africa. You're expressing your uniqueness, your tradition, you're expressing your culture, you're expressing your inheritance. If the Anglo-Saxon person says, where are you from? The question is not where were you born? The question is not what national are you? The question is, are you a citizen of Great Britain? The question is, where are you from? In other words, you're projecting an image. Your image seems fascinating. Where's your ancestry from? Where are your people from? What is your heritage? What is your ethnicity? Because there are so many people who share your ethnic image, and therefore society will put them on the political spectrum as being of the same race. But we know you're different. You individually are all unique. by culture. So where is the origin of the beauty that you're expressing? That question, in my opinion, is a profoundly curious and a profoundly fascinating and a profoundly honoring question to ask. It signifies that a person is eager to learn. People who are from this land and who are Anglo-Saxon need to be given some benefit of the doubt in interactions by people who share my ethnic image for a number of reasons. If you've been born or if you've lived in a country other than Great Britain, but for some reason you hold a dual nationality or citizenship, or you're just a resident here, one of the things you learn is that in your homeland, because we all have a soil from whence we came. Now, over time, things change, but we do all have a soil from whence our ancestry began. One of the things you learn is that you're like a goldfish in an aquarium, in a bowl. You've never had the opportunity, if you haven't been moved across different tanks, to see the world in real time and to touch and feel the world. So someone who was born in, let's say, for example, Tunisia, is aware of the tribal separations in Tunisia, the ethnic separations in Tunisia. Same people, same nation, different in religion, different in culture, different in ethnicity, different in what they believe to be the binding string that holds them together. They're different tribes, different dialects, different languages. But they are a lot more sensitive to that difference because it's in real time. They are in the bowl like a goldfish, they can see. Should they move to another tank, in this case, move to, say, Germany, now they're in another land, in a different bowl. They need to be more sympathetic to the fact that the people of the land do not have, I would say, the richness of experience of travel, culture that you might have. But also, the people of the land in Germany do not know in detail your history, your culture, your uniqueness, and what makes you celebrated. And so sometimes the questions are put forward very poorly, very, very poorly. The questions are put forward by some people in ways that perhaps in modern times we would consider those to be offensive. But you have to remember that prior to the 1950s, those who were Generation X and baby boomers, they think, and they were raised very differently, particularly the baby boomers and the generation before the baby boomers, the silent generation, they were raised very differently. So they still operate through the lens through which they were raised. They have not had time to grow into the social media era where certain words have different meanings or have been changed. And the definitions are like the weather. Every season, it means something different. In your interactions with people, you have to come in good faith. You have to be forgiving, even when errors of omission and commission are committed against you. You have to be subtle and sophisticated by not holding on to the words that people say. Because only the spirit of a man knows the real thoughts of a man. Similarly, you cannot know the thoughts of someone even when they express it with words. Sometimes we're clumsy in our ability to communicate. Now, in my interactions with people, and those who do not share my ethnic image, I have noticed, and this is where you have to be very observant, I have noticed when people want to ask you a question, but they do not know how to ask that question. But it's coming from a place of genuine curiosity. But they do not want to come across as being offensive or prejudging. And they struggle. like a young child with words. You're trying to say something, but you don't know how. As I'm speaking with and to you, I'm doing in real time what we call thinking. The way we think is in words or in pictures. But when we communicate our words and our thoughts, we're refining our thought process, because sometimes the way things sound in your head are not always the same when spoken. You have to give some grace. The grace is to say, I will give ground because I'm assuming that you've come to the table in good faith. This then means that even if you're wrong and the person intends to give offense, there are two other steps that are needed before you get to a point of being offended. The first is that you have to receive the offense. And the second, and more important, you have to accept the offense. People who share my ethnic image in the West have, especially those who were born in the West. Now, I make that clarification to make a point. When I meet people who, and I have something to say about people who were born in the motherland, when I meet people who were born in parts of Africa, who have the richness of history of Africa, or their ancestry, and their heritage, and their inheritance, and their ethnicity, and their people, good, bad, or indifferent, whatever the ancestry or history could be, good, bad, or indifferent, they think very differently to those who were born in the UK, although they have a similar self-image as those born in the UK. They're more forgiving. Why? Because a lot of the things that we use in the West as reasons to hate and fight and curse and debate each other on the grounds of race and ethnicity, they mean nothing in Africa. Now, I can tell you, and I hope I'm saying this with conviction, and I can say this with commitment, irrespective of the country you go to in Africa. Now, there are 54 countries, so for a start, we're all different. But irrespective of the country you go to in Africa, tribal issues exist. The least amount of tribal fractions would be at least 10 times worse than what we see in the West along the lines of racial inequality or racial integration or racial discrimination. 10 times worse, the least. We call it tribal warfare. So much so that in parts of Africa, people kill each other. People of a similar ethnicity and area have fractions within because they have a different dialect, they're a different sub-tribe. Tribalism is a huge thing in parts of Africa. It's the same across the world. We are, by definition, tribal, which is why nationalism will always triumph over liberalism. People stick to their groups, and until they understand that you have been educated, assimilated, integrated, and if you choose to intermarry with them, they have this level of apprehension against people who they don't know, because it's a natural instinct to protect yourself and preserve yourself by being careful about cultures you do not know. Go back to the hunter-gatherer times and days. If you saw someone from a distance who was not part of your tribe, because communication and conversations had not yet evolved to the point where people could interact, body language and subtle suggestions was always the giveaway. The way people walked, we called it the gait, your gait. The way people spoke, the harshness of their faces, perhaps whether they were, their fists were clenched, indicated to the other party whether the person was coming in peace or coming for war. If you got that decision wrong, sometimes it costs you your life. So instinctively, we had developed a way of protecting our people and ourselves. Now, I do have to say, since the liberal movement of the 50s began, we've seen more travel, we've seen more interconnectivity between people, and so The need for that adversarial fight has been minimized. Nevertheless, it's no longer kinetic or physical. It's now ideological and intellectual, and we dialogue and we say things. Now, I bring you back to what I think is an important part of today's session, which is those who share my ethnic image will never be seen to be the same or considered to be equals, because we are not behaving as equals. Now, obstacles will always be placed before you, behind you, ahead of you, above you, underneath you. It's called life. The question is, would you go behind, around, through, above, beneath the obstacle? Or would you stop and scream that the system is not fair? Those who share my ethnic image in the West need to grow up. And I do not extend this equally across all parties. And here's the reason. I tend to find, from my observation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when I meet people who were born in Ghana, in Uganda, in Nigeria, when I meet people who were born in, say, Ethiopia, in any part of Africa, and they were born and raised and have been taught about their culture, their heritage, their ethnicity, when I see these people in the UK, I tend to observe a level of success, a mindset that is more open to the world. I tend to see that their outcomes are much better than those who were born in the UK, but are from the same ancestry locations in Africa. And I've always asked the question, why? I think one of the reasons is because the people who come from the motherland have this identity of self. They understand that you go out to the world and you make something of yourself. You don't ask for forgiveness. You don't ask for the tasks to be easier. You don't ask for the obstacles to be removed from your way. You don't ask for forgiveness. You don't even ask for permission. You don't ask for things to be made simple, or you don't ask for compensation. You go into the world and you take no prisoners. You do whatever it takes to compete, recognizing that it's an unequal landscape. And here is the key thing. Those people recognize that it's the obstacles that makes you the man or the woman that you should be. That if all obstacles were moved away, think about a hurdle race. No obstacles, then you run an easy straight race. Adjusting in the right time, at the right place, at the right pace to jump is what develops the muscles. You have to be able to jump and run, two different skill sets. So these people outcompete, outperform the people who are similar to them, even by ancestry, but different by upbringing. In the United States, here's the good statistics. Nigerians outperform all and most, on average, Black American or African American people who were born in the United States. Nigerians who migrated to the United States outperform those who were born in the same country. They come, they identify opportunities. In many ways, we'll go back to the goldfish analogy. The people who will come in as migrants are like people who are watching and looking at a goldfish in a tank and saying, "Ooh, I'll have that. Ooh, that's some food. Oh, that's some food." And they can see the fishes inside. The fishes cannot see because the fish is so used to being fed every single day. And they wait for the same hours, same time, for the food to come from the top. Those who come from outside, being entrepreneurial, being hardworking, being industrious, willing to take no prisoners, willing to do whatever it takes, recognizing that the life in Africa is much harder than the life in Great Britain or in the United States. They go to work, and in a few short years, they've made something of themselves. In the UK, those who share my ethnic image, especially those who were born in the UK, who have not had what I call the gifts of the struggles of Africa, who haven't had the gift of the lineage being transferred to them, ancestry, the inheritance, the stories, the struggles, the pain, the suffering that comes from being born or bred in Africa, will always be like children looking for milk. Well, sometimes you have to wean yourself away from mother's breasts. You're an adult. You can't keep asking for breast milk. There's time to develop your gum, your jaw, and eating some real food. Now, I said all of this for a reason. Because we conflate nationality, which is simply where you've decided that you want to be a subject to. Citizenship is more political. It simply says I have a document and I can be a citizen. You can be a citizen by birth, by family. You can be a citizen by application, through economics, by investing in a country. You can be a citizen by so many other considerations. It means absolutely nothing. It simply says I have a document. That document allows me certain rights and responsibilities, but I can choose. So this is why you can have one person have 7 or 8 different citizenships. It means nothing. Nationality, on the other hand, is where we say the states, for accepting your allegiance to our state, we will protect you. You have responsibilities and you have some freedoms. We should never conflate nationality, citizenship, and ethnicity. When dealing with people who were from the land, the soil, from an ancestry, from a heritage, and from an inheritance perspective, be a little bit more subtle and sophisticated. Now, in the prior session, I used a good example. I said, just imagine an Anglo-Saxon man born in, let's say, Accra, Ghana. White as white can be, forgive me for using that, but has the Ghanaian accent. And let's even say he has a Ghanaian name. He was born in Ghana, he grew up in Ghana, but white as white can be. Imagine him going to a local council meeting or event, and he's dressed in a suit and a hat, like an Englishman, like a gentleman. And in the same event, other people are dressed in their local Ghanaian attires, and someone says to him, where are you from? It would be in many ways dishonoring of him to say, I'm Ghanaian, I'm from Ghana. The reason being blood and soil. The question of where you're from is not where you were born, it's not where you live, it's not where you were raised, it's not where your children are, it's not where you have real estate or money or assets. The question is, you're dressed in a certain way. Where are your people from? What is your history? What is your lineage? What is the story? From whence was your seed? And from whence did your seed come? It would be insulting for him or her to say, well, I'm from Accra, I'm from Ghana. No. You would have to be a little bit more subtle in explaining and use more words so that people can understand. And you can say, I'm Anglo-Saxon, my parents are English, I was born in Accra, Ghana, I live here, I love the people, I speak the language. So I would say I'm one of you, but my lineage and my inheritance takes me back to the motherland, the small island that we call England. That is a little bit easier for people to absorb, because what tends to happen is when people identify differences in how you style yourself, differences in how you speak, differences in how you communicate, differences in your physical attributes, the color of your eyes, the texture of your hair, the symmetry of your face, people ask questions. Sometimes the questions may not be in good faith. My experience has been most of the time it comes from a good place. So let me close today's session by saying a few things. My observation over the past 15 years is that you will always have people who want to profit from stoking our differences and making it the center of why our social interactions are the way they are. These people are paid, they're compensated, and they will always profit from the war between you and I. I'd like you to rob those people of the opportunity to use you as a pawn in the game that they are playing, whether those people are white or light-skinned or black or dark-skinned. There are race grievance mongers on both sides of the table. Even in my opinion, what I have found is that my Anglo-Saxon brothers and sisters, for some reason, have a guilt complex. The guilt comes from their ancestors and the history. The guilt comes from the good, the bad and the ugly of that heritage. They've clinged too much to the bad, and they're disavowing the good. I've had people who are Anglo-Saxon debate me about some of the things that I've shared with you and try to convince me that I should take a victim status and I should feel like a victim and I should always see them as villains. On one occasion, I went to someone's house, and you couldn't make this stuff up. You just couldn't. Here I am in a house worth about £5 million in central London, from a very wealthy family. People who, let's just put it, come from very, 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 very wealthy heritage. And they're trying to convince me that it's important for me to feel like a victim. And I'm thinking to myself, you can't make this up. You cannot make this up. I have found, in a lot of ways, the Anglo-Saxon Englishman and woman and their parents, the parents particularly, have done a huge disservice in not telling them about what makes them unique. Some of the things like, and their inheritance, Western civilization, the Judeo-Christian values and foundations that built this great country, my country, they haven't been told about the Enlightenment. And so, what I'm observing is the younger ones are being raised to disavow all of these great inheritances. Now, I go back to ancestry, heritage, and what you get as an inheritance. People are selling their birthright. They're selling their inheritance for a victim or a villain status in this case, which I think is tragic. Many a times I have said to people who are Anglo-Saxon and white, irrespective of where they come from, that we do not need your help. We do not need your pity. We do not need obstacles to be removed. What does not kill us is what makes us stronger. I've always competed in every area that I find myself. I love the competition. I don't care how many obstacles I put before me. I don't care if I'm brought in chains. My philosophy has always been, it's the chains that will set me free. It's the obstacles that will make me into the man that I should be. I've always believed in the law of averages. That if I'm competing against you, I don't care whether the system is rigged in your favor. I don't care whether there are more obstacles in my pathway and less in your way. No problem. I will beat you irrespectively. If I have to work 2,000 more hours every year than you do, it'll be my pleasure. Here's the difference. At the end of a 2-year period, 1-year period, my muscles, my memory, my tenacity, my sacrifices, my sweat, my blood would have defined to me, not to you, would have defined what I call who I am. Success is not achieving a goal, though that is part of what success should be. Success is always based on identifying where you are, identifying where you want to get to, and moving progressively in that direction. Taking with that journey and the destination, whatever obstacles come your way, and taking that in good faith, not waving your hand towards the sky and saying things are rigged, and not waving your hands towards the other person in front of you and saying you are the villain and the enemy, but in saying every day I would wake up and I would dream and I will take action and I will plan. And if I progressively move in the direction of my dreams in a way that I do not know and I need not know, providing I stick to my plan, I will meet with success, unexpected, in uncommon hours. I might get there at a later time, and that's okay, but I will get there. And even if I do not make it to the other side, my success is the journey. The destination is the icing on the cake. Let me encourage, in closing, those particularly who share my ethnic image to stop asking for permission and stop asking for an even playing field and stop asking for the villains to be put on a pike, put on a stick and burned or crucified. No, just stay true to yourself. Someday, the small percentage of people who are the villains, they might come to their road to Damascus moment. The same people might be converted from Saul to Paul. Who knows? Stick to your cross. Carry your cross up the hills to the place of the skulls. That is where your cross will be. Don't worry about your neighbor. Don't worry about the fact that the cross is too heavy. Sometimes you need help. You can ask for Simon. Sometimes you might get help. And other times, if you do not get help, hey, I would rather go out thinking that was a great adventure than go out thinking, what could I have become? Hell on earth, and this is where most people find themselves, is every day they come across the person that they could have been. Now, if you're of the mindset that you always need to be helped, then someday you will meet that person that you could have been. And I hope that won't be hell for you. Now, to those who do not share my ethnic image, the best advice I can give you is simple. I don't care about the sins of your fathers. My fathers committed sins too. And if you believe in the sins of the fathers, then perhaps you should appeal to your fathers and your ancestors to pay their price. But please stop asking the children, the grandchildren of the people who are simply part of an inheritance that have come from their ancestors to pay a price to the sons and daughters of those who were inflicted with pains but were not here. In other words, I believe in equal pay. If you commit a sin, then you should pay the price. I do not believe that the sons of those who committed the crime against other people should pay the sons of the people who the crimes were committed against, but their offsprings. I don't believe in that. Be proud of who you are. You're not a villain. Stop accepting the villain status. We don't want to be victims. Stop appealing to the victims in each and every one of us. We want to compete. And the best thing I can say to you, those who share a different ethnic image, and I'll use the example that I know very well, which is martial arts. For many years, I competed. I trained, I competed, and the best phases of my experience were the opportunity to train with and against people who were much better than myself. And saying to them, please don't pull your punches. Don't pull back your kicks. I grow by sparring against the best version of you. So bring your best to the tatami or to the dojo every single time. There is no greater thing you can do to reduce and derail someone's growth than removing what should be good stress, good opportunities, because you think it's too big for them. Yes, we have a belt system in martial arts, but you do not tailor your performance always. So it's too easy. It's like playing video games. You need a level of difficulty to allow the person to emerge, to pull from that person in the present their future self. Sometimes you have to go through the fire. And my experience was, I got better when I got my ass kicked, when I got beat, when I timed the punch and I got it wrong, when I was around people who were much better than myself. Iron sharpened iron. In the West today, it's a race to the bottom. The villains want to be vilified. The victims want to remain victims. It's a race to the bottom. We need each other, but we need to hold each other accountable. And in closing, those who do not share my ethnic image, don't be afraid to challenge and question and push back. Don't be afraid to remain curious and fascinated and inquisitive. Don't give up the linguistic territory to the mongers, the race mongers amongst us. Stand for something. Stand for what your forefathers believed in. On the shores of Normandy, they stood for what they believed in. Stop throwing what you believe in and what they believed in away. This is your land. Now, we claim an inheritance now on the land. This is home for us, yes. But many of us have gone through the education, the integration, the assimilation, the intermarriage. This is home. But stand for something. Stop being ashamed of who you are. I hope that's been useful. Well, welcome to another session. I would like, in today's session, to, I guess, go a little bit deeper into a conversation I started yesterday regarding an interaction between a royal aide in Buckingham Palace and a woman by the name of Ngozi Fulani. I stated in the prior session that the interaction between both parties should have been from the basis or on the foundation of good faith, and that offense should not have been taken because offense was not initially given. Today's session, I'd like to go a little bit deeper and provide my perspective of some observations that I have made in the UK and in my interactions with people over the past few decades. But more importantly, the key to, or the theme that I want to focus on is the fact that those who share my ethnic image will never be treated as equals or respected by the rest of society until and unless we start to act our age. Freedom comes with responsibility, something that we have to keep reminding people of. Those who share my ethnic image, for some reason, especially in the West, continue, and I should qualify the reference, those who share my ethnic image but were born in the West and have very little traditional roots or connections with the motherland seem to have an initial desire for acceptance, and an initial desire for acknowledgement by other races and by other ethnic groups. There's always a victim status that we seem to want to wear and have, we come to interactions usually in bad faith because we have been influenced over the past decade by politics. And we have been adopting ideologies from the United States that are, in my opinion, appalling. The United States is a melting pot. It was designed that way. People from all over the world came to a barren land to make a new life for themselves. Therefore, the melting pot started very early, and over time has come to be what we call the United States of America. The United States is the only country in the world ever and over history to have successfully integrated over a long span of time without any form of social construction, what people consider to be perhaps an admirable melting pot, but one that can also be improved. Canada, over the last 20, 30 years, has done very, very well. It's done so successfully, and it's done so with fewer of the complications and issues that the United States had to learn by trial and error. Canada has been able to avoid such mistakes. At the core of Canada's success was the willingness to allow the people of Canada, the original people, to whom the Canadian land can be claimed. The English and the French Canadians were allowed to participate in a national discussion about the importance of bringing in people of skill, bringing in people of different ethnic backgrounds, histories, race, people of different religions and traditions, for the greater good of what is called Canada. It was done successfully, carefully but successfully. Everyone felt that the discussion received their consent. The United States did not go through that because it was originally a barren land, and therefore the melting pot over time was allowed to create its own uniqueness. Across the entire West, if you exclude the two countries in North America, what you find is that since the 1940s and 1950s, we've had a lot more movement of people, travel. People have been allowed to visit, stay, and naturalize in different locations in the West. Interestingly, what we've also found is that in other parts of the West, the decision to allow more people into the nation states were done by politicians and by people in power. But there was never a national conversation where the majority of people said, yes, we consent. We want to be more diverse. We want other cultures, other people, other languages into our nation state. From the 1950s, we saw liberalism being spread across the whole world. If you combine that with the fact that the welfare state was also made into almost a privilege and a right across most Western countries, or in the modern Western countries, we then saw a combination of the liberal ideas and effectively welfare being presented as something that anyone who was within a nation was entitled to such provisions. Now, the reason I've taken some time to explain all of this is in order to know why we are here or where we are, we have to look back and understand how we got to where we are. The UK specifically prior to the 1950s was roughly about 96, 97%. In every single, you might say, large city, in every large town, was primarily the Anglo-Saxons. But across the whole of the Great Britain and the United Kingdom, what we found was roughly 98% of the people were from what we call the land. These were people who'd come from the ancestry line of the Germans and the Vikings, the Anglos and the Saxons. So it was quite unusual. Although there was movement of people, the movement was more specifically from parts of Europe. People came and they left. They went back to their land, their native land. In any case, we've had an increase in population from people across the world, and there have been huge benefits to that. But there's been a cultural, almost, I won't call it stalemate. There were a number of things that were important to understand in order for immigration to work. Education, integration, assimilation, intermarry or intermarriage. The 4 steps, very simple: education, integration, assimilation, and intermarriage. And there was a time period that had to be allowed for the people who came through to be educated about the native land, their culture, their traditions, their people, their history, their welfare. Enough time was allowed for people to assimilate into that new lifestyle, so that there was never a thing about you and us. You needed time for integration. Integration takes time, but it works with assimilation. People have to come in good faith, respecting the culture of the land and hoping to be part of the people, not to distinguish themselves based on race, ethnicity, not to distinguish themselves based on the melanin content of your skin, but to look at character and values and principles and philosophy and shared skill sets. Done properly, you have a melting pot. And in the early days, the United States and Canada were able to do this. The UK has done very, very poorly in those 4 steps. So what we find is, as the welfare state has grown, people from across the world have been incentivized to come, not necessarily because they want to be educated, they want to assimilate into, or integrate into, or even intermarry with the English culture or the British people or culture. They are coming because they think, I can get myself a better life, but I will stay within the silo of my ideology and my values and my religion, and I will not integrate. And over time, what we've found is that there have been people who, like an hourglass, sit in the middle, who make money. I call them race mongers, who make money by stowing and stoking division. Our similarities makes us similar and creates what we call sameness. It is our difference and our uniqueness that makes us special. And if we were all the same, which is what a nation state technically is from a cultural perspective, you have a certain level of richness to the population. But when you bring in other palettes, the other palettes can intensify the overall beauty of a nation by illustrating that although we are of a different heritage, because we share a tradition, the same love for soil, the same love for the motherland, the same love for each of us, you can have a much richer, let's call it painting. In the session I did yesterday, I started by explaining that there is a huge difference between ancestry, your heritage, your ethnicity, your nationality, and citizenship. We conflate those terms very poorly. Now, I'm going to speak to those who share my ethnic image. And I can speak to you as a father, as a brother, as a friend, but also as one who comes with love, as harsh as I might or seem or sound. The intention is good. The rebuke is perhaps needed. We will never be seen or considered to be equals with the people of the land. Not because we are not equals, not because we're not equal in ability, not because we're not equal in our contribution, should we choose to, not because we're not equal under the law, not because we're not equal in terms of the rights we have as citizens, not because we're not equal metaphysically or spiritually. We're all equal. And also not because equality of opportunity does not exist. We will never be seen as equals behind closed doors, primarily because, for some reason, we have